Thank you for joining us this evening for the DeeDee Benel Memorial Service, whether you're here in person or on Zoom. As we all mourn DeeDee's loss, we specifically recognize and extend our condolences and support to Victor, Dani, Gabi, and Lena Benel, and to Simeon and Diane Fensterheim, DeeDee's immediate family. Tonight gives us all the opportunity to reflect on the impact that DeeDee made on each of our lives. Family, friends, students, colleagues, admirers. For me, DeeDee was a 31-year friend, mentor, partner, and all-around inspiration. No milestone moment, personally or professionally, went unrecognized without significant participation and thoughtful input. As was the case with so many, DeeDee's impact was far greater than on me alone. She left an indelible mark on my wife, my children, who called her Aunt DeeDee, and my mother. As we will all hear tonight, DeeDee's impact was far greater than the halls and walls of Ramaz. She literally created an olam of chesed. DeeDee fulfilled the words written in Sefer Tehilim, olam chesed yibaneh. It is written there, ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh shamayim, yitaken emunatcha bahem. I declare your steadfast love is confirmed forever. There in the heavens you establish your faithfulness. The world is built with kindness. Why use the word built rather than made or created? We know that when Hashem creates the world in Sefer Bereshit, it's written, Bereshit bara Elohim, and God built, as opposed to when we hear about the way that peace is created in the heavens, and it says, Oseh shalom v'romav. Hashem makes peace in the heavens. Chesed, kindness on earth, is not made with a single word. It needs to be built step by step, person by person, action by action. It needs to include effort, commitment, and love. This is exactly how DeeDee Benel approached chesed. She built pathways to chesed for her students, and as part of that was building them for future generations. She enabled others to build upon her foundation, and thus their own worlds of chesed were created, which will make everlasting generations that will build upon what she did. That is her true legacy and what we will hear about this evening. Please refer to your program for the order of the program, and for those on Zoom, the program will be placed in your chat. In Psalm 15, King David reflects upon what kind of person is held in high esteem by God. In summary, the one who is held in high esteem by God is someone who does that which is right and good, and always acts out of a feeling of obligation towards other people, towards the world, and out of a sense of tzedek and mishpat, righteousness and justice. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai mi yagor be'ohayecha, mi yishton behar koshecha. הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא בגן על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס, ואת יראי אדוני יכבד. נשבע להרע ולא ימיר. כספו לא נתן בנשך, ושוחד על נקי לא לקח, עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. Psalm for David. Lord, who will sojourn in your tent? Who will dwell on your holy mountain? Who is held in high esteem by you? He who walks blameless and does justice and speaks the truth in his heart, who slanders not with his tongue, nor does to his fellow man evil, nor bears reproach for his kin. The debased in his eyes is repugnant, but to Lord-fearers he accords honor. When he vows to his fellow man, he does not revoke it. His money he does not give interest, and no bribe for the innocent takes. One who does these will never stumble. I think by this definition, DeeDee dwells in Hashem's tent and on his holy mountain.
It chose Psalm 121 because more than anyone that I've ever known, Ms. Benel would wake up in the morning and ask two questions. What can I do to serve Ramaz KJ community? And what can I do to serve Hashem? And she had these multiple bosses that she had to answer to. And when she finished doing her work for the school, she started saying, what can I do for Hashem and for his world? What would he want me to do? And how can I make it better? Shir Mahalo, Esoinai Larid, Me'ayu, Yato Ezri, Me'im Adonai, Ose Shomayim, Va'aretz. DeeDee turned to Hashem constantly, because he was the only one who was awake with her while she was working. Al Yitei Ramot Lecha, Al Yanu Shomecha, Hine Lo Yanu Lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael, Adonai Shomecha, Adonai Tzilocha, Yad Minecha. But Hashem was always sort of supporting her and making her feel that she should continue to do the great work that she's doing. Yomam Hashem Eshloyatecha B'Yareya Tavoiva Adonai Yishmor Chomikol Ra Yishmor Nafshecha Adonai Yishmor Tzitzovecha Mi'atav Yadavah. She had a very, very deep connection to Hashem, and we hope that Hashem will continue to watch her soul as she goes forward.
Good evening, I'm Jonathan Cannon. I'm the current head of school here at Ramaz. When I began 3 years ago, I moved into an apartment in a building on the corner of 86th Street and 2nd Avenue. And I moved in on Monday nights, and I left for school on Tuesday morning. And as I was leaving the apartment, this person came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm DeeDee Benel. I work at the school," and a quick-ish history of the work that she does. And I think, if I hadn't known better, I'd have thought she was stalking me. And in fact, never to know better, she was in fact stalking me. And I tell you this about the apartment, not because I want to talk about me, because I want to talk about the doorman at the apartments. I shared with them a few nights ago that this memorial service was going to be taking place. And yesterday, one of them asked me if there was a link to the memorial service. And I said, yes, and I sent Dominic a link to the memorial service, and he shared it with all the other doormen and doorwomen at the apartment, because it was mad, a bit mad. And as I left the apartment this evening, they were kind of waving their phones at me, we've got this, we're going to be watching this. And I think that's just one small example of how it mattered to me. And that she was able to build a connection. It was important for her to build a connection. There is a tradition during the month of Elul, or in the period surrounding Rosh Hashanah, it's traditional to visit the gravestone, to visit a cemetery. And in fact, interestingly, we're just at the end of Av, and the Hasidic community believe that you should visit the cemetery immediately before it. And so that this is the period. And it's actually, you know, as I have been trying to learn more and understand more about that custom, I thought it was a fairly obvious custom. You're coming up to Rosh Hashanah, you visit your loved ones. It turns out that it's more complicated than that, that actually visiting the cemetery is something that should not happen that often. The rabbis are very concerned. If people went to visit too frequently, they would end up having a, you know, almost worshipping their dead relative instead of understanding the bigger picture. So it was very important to visit the cemetery, but there's also guidelines as to when to visit. And one of the guidelines is, or one of the directions is, you don't perform mitzvot within 4 amot, right in the area immediately next to the gravestones. And I think probably the most visual sign of that now is, if you're at a cemetery, you may see people who would normally wear their sit out, will tuck their sit inside, just when they go near to the kever, just when they go into the burial site, because there's this idea that you don't perform mitzvot. And the question is, what's that idea about? And it comes from Brachot, from the Talmud in Brachot. But Rabbi Isaac Cook, who DeeDee would sometimes quote, actually has a very interesting information which helped me understand something about DeeDee. And he said that when you stand at the graveside, you're in this very complex place between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, between the world that you're in and Olam Haba. The person that you've come to visit is in Olam Haba, and you are in Olam Hazeh, and you're kind of struggling to find the right balance between the two. And part of that is that you don't do something too publicly that is associated with Olam Haba. So mitzvot, which are very much part of Olam Hazeh, you kind of put them a little bit aside out of respect to the person, out of respect to the deceased. Rabbi Moshe Isserles takes it one step further, where he says, and that's one of the reasons why people go at Rosh Hashanah, that you ask the deceased to intercede on your behalf as it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that their mitzvot, who they are. And that's a very complicated idea, because you can't be asking God to intercede on your behalf. So you have to be very careful what you say. And that's why there's so many mitzvot and timing about visiting the kever. One of the really interesting things to me, many stories and much of what I know about DeeDee is she lived in this tension between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. What she always tried to do was to bring Olam Haba, was to bring what perfection would be like into Olam Hazeh. That was like her mission in life, and it was very individualized. You could go to a fire station with DeeDee, and all the fire, everyone knew her. It was like, hi DeeDee, go to a hospital. It's like, you know, they didn't know the doctors there, but they knew DeeDee when she came out. And everything she was doing was to try and live in this space. And I think Rabbi Schiowitz also highlighted, and at the end of the day, Ramaz is like, what can I do for God? It's like every space, every place that DeeDee was to say, how can I bring the beauty of Olam Haba? How can I bring a life of paradise? How can I look at somebody who's so far away from being able to have that life and bring that life a little bit closer to them? And so I think that as we go into Elul, and we go into Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, I certainly know that DeeDee's soul is sitting up there right next to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I kind of ask on my behalf if you can put in a good word, DeeDee, because I know that God isn't going to say no to anything DeeDee asks, nobody ever does. So I certainly wish the family, wish everybody. She is such a presence. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like without that immediate presence. But know that everybody at Ramaz is committed to keeping her presence, her soul, and her vision alive.
Once, Leonard Cohen read an entire poem on the radio. The interviewer asked him, "What does the poem mean?" Cohen paused for a long moment and then read the entire poem again. How do you explain a work of art in words? You had to see it. You had to see my mom in motion to even begin to understand the loss we are all grappling with. That someone like my mom existed is hard to believe. That she is gone is unfathomable. לפני שאדם נולד, הכל פתוח ויקום בלעדיו. כשהוא חי, הכל סגור בו בחייו. וכשהוא מת, הכל שוב פתוח. פתוח, סגור, פתוח, זה כל האדם. Yehuda Amichai wrote, "Open, close, open." Before we are born, everything is open in the universe without us. For as long as we live, everything is closed within us. And when we die, everything is open again. Open, closed, open. That's all we are. Ima, you held a universe inside of you that was sometimes inscrutable to your children, and you held an illness inside of you that was a mystery to the outside world. But now it's open for all of us to behold. The majesty of a life lived on a major scale, punctuated sometimes with minor chords and disappointments of time not to be, in work left undone. It was February 2020, COVID was in the headlines. My mom was in chemo treatment, and we were on the phone. Ima, I said, "You can't get on a plane for this mission to post-Hurricane Puerto Rico." That didn't land well. She went, of course. Where did this strength come from? Who takes care of those who take care of the world? Without the chesed of my father and my brother, we all would have suffered less time with my mom. Their care, particularly in this last year, provided her with the gevura that sustained the chesed. And on behalf of my family, we are endlessly grateful to the Ramaz KJ community for the kindness you have shown us over these difficult weeks. It is no small thing. Azamra lelokai be'odi. Rav Nachman comments, be'odi veda. Hainu al yedei befinat ha'od sheli. I will sing to God be'odi, with the little I have left. Specifically be'odi, by means of the ode, the extra that I find in myself. Ima, we are heartbroken to lose you, but we saw what you were able to do even in this last year with that tiny bit of ode, of extra inside of you. An extra bit now open to the universe, to all of us to access, to strengthen us, to marvel at. Thank you.
Sorry, Dani, but I use the same quotation from the Avigail. We both know the DeeDee adored Yehuda but I'll say it in Hebrew. יהודה עמיחי כותב, לפני שאדם נולד, הכל פתוח ביקום בלעדיו, וכשהוא חי, הכל סגור בחייו, וכשהוא מת, הכל שוב פתוח. DeeDee בחייה הייתה חלק אינטימי מהעולם שלי ושלה, שהיה סגור לכל האחרים, לתלמידי רמז ולבוגרים, לשוער בבניין, לנהג ממונסי, ליועץ מחברת הפנסיה, לקבלן מפנסילבניה, לחבדניק מאספן, לצלם ממעלה, לכל משפחות הקהילה שלנו, שעזרה להם להתחקות אחרי השורשים והעולמות שלהם, לדורותיהם, לחסרי הבית, לשבויי צה"ל. ולערכים שהנחו את חייה, לציונות, למורשת היהודית, להתנדבות, לאיכות הסביבה, לזכויות האדם באשר הוא, לצדק החברתי, לסובלנות וליושרה. דידי של ויקטור, דני וגבי, דידי של רמז, דידי שלי. דידי שלי התחילה בהיסטוריה שלנו, שהחלה בחדר השפקולים בקומה השלישית בתיכון. תסלחי לי, אבל למה את רצה כל כך מהר? כך פניתי אליה בראשונה, מבלי אפילו לדעת את שמה, ומשם המשכנו. המשכנו לשיחות עד אור הבוקר בטיילת באיסטן, כי לדבר עם דידי זה היה בשבילי כמו לדבר עם עצמי. כי תמיד בסוף אפשר היה לצחוק ביחד על הכל, ולריב בלהט על הדעות הפוליטיות המנוגדות שלנו. מספיק כבר איתך, השמאלנית מצפון תל אביב, הייתה אומרת לי. ואני תמיד הייתי עונה, מספיק גם איתך כבר, מפלטבוש, מברוקלין, מהגולן. ואז הרוחות היו נסערות יותר ויותר, והיא הייתה ממהרת להעלות את שמם של כל צוררי היהודים שקמו עלינו לכלותנו. ואני הייתי כועסת עליה, ועל חוסר האמפתיה שלה לצד השני של ישראל, מאחורי גדר הגבול. בסוף הוויכוחים הייתה מחבקת אותי ואומרת, נו דנלה, הזוי גצל. וגם על החיים לעומקם תמיד דיברנו. על הציפיות שלנו מהילדים, על אופי האימהות שלנו, על מי בדיוק העציר, יכעיס או תסכל אותנו, על איך להתגבר על געגועים. פעם, כשעברתי דירה, בפעם המי יודע כמה, שאלה אותי, איך את מרגישה עם המעבר? ואני עניתי, ממש לא כלום. והיא השיבה, תביני, אדם שעוזב את מולדתו ועוקר לגור במקום אחר, אף מעבר נוסף בחייו כבר לא משמעותי בשבילו. כמה נכון, כמה עמוק, כמה דידי. אני שומעת את הקול שלה מדבר איתי בצר לי, את מילות הנחמה, העידוד, הפרגון והתמיכה. אני שומעת את הקול שלה ברגעי הסיפוק והאושר, כמו שעדיין מחזיקה את ידי וחוזרת אין סוף פעמים שתמיד אפשר להתקשר בכל שעה, בכל רגע, לחלוק, לשתף, להתייעץ ולהתלבט ביחד, ללא גבולות של זמן, ללא מחיצות. פתוח, סגור, פתוח. מה שדידי השאירה איתי, יחיה איתי פתוח לנצח. Open, close, open. Before we are born, everything is open in the universe without us. For as long as we live, everything is closed within us. And when we die, everything is open again. Didi and I existed in a world of our own, closed from everyone else. From Ramaz students and alumni, the security guards, the driver from Monsi, the pension fund manager, Habitat for Humanity, the Chabadnik from Aspen, the cinema photographer from Maale, the families in our community whom she helped discover the roots, the homeless, the IDF prisoners of war. We existed in an intimate space, closed, independent of the core values, Zionism, Judaism, Chesed, the environment, human rights, social justice, tolerance, integrity. Victor and Dani and Gabi's Didi, Ramaz's Didi, my Didi. My history with Didi began in the third floor copy room. Sorry, but why are you always running? My first words to her, before I even knew her name, and we kept going. We kept going until daylight along the East River, because talking to Didi was like talking to myself. because we could laugh about anything and argue vehemently about our opposing Israeli politics. She would say, enough with you lefty from North Tel Aviv. And I would respond, enough with you, Flatbush, Brooklyn, diaspora. And then we got even more heated, and she would name all the enemies that ever tried to destroy the Jewish people. And I would get angry about her lack of empathy for the other side. And in the end, after arguing, DeeDee would hug me and say, no, Danale, Azoi gets it. We spoke about our lives in depth, our aspirations for our children, motherhood, what made us sad, frustrated, or angry, how to confront longing. After I moved apartments again, DeeDee asked me how I felt about the move. I responded that I feel nothing at all. DeeDee then told me, when you uproot yourself from your homeland, no move after that can ever compare. How true, how profound, how vivid. I hear her voice in my sorrow, words of comfort, encouragement, support. I hear her voice when I'm satisfied and content, still holding my hand, telling me again and again that I can call at any hour to confide in her, seek advice, think out loud, no time limits, no barriers. Open, closed, open. What DeeDee gave me will stay with me, open forever.
Ah, DeeDee, how could death have extinguished your flaming light? I can't believe it yet. DeeDee was, as you've been hearing tonight and will continue to hear, a force to be reckoned with. A ball of fire on sneakered feet, always running. Age did not slow her at all. Our perennial comparison was the Energizer Bunny. She was so fast and so indefatigable, I never saw her rest. She only sometimes spent 5 minutes in the cafeteria eating a little egg salad and lettuce. I don't think DeeDee was trying to preserve her lovely girlish figure. She simply had no time. There was so much to do and so few hours to repair the world. Every inch of it, it sometimes seemed. Part of the beauty of DeeDee's character, though, was even as she considered the big picture and strove to make the entire world a better place, she never neglected the human beings before her. She always had time for the personal and the particular. For her family, of course, she would tell me of Gabe and Dani's latest accomplishments, and she would wax especially eloquent about the beautiful grandchildren. We would whip out our cell phones to exchange pictures and plan shidduchim between our amazing 5-year-olds. But DeeDee made time for her extended family too, which was everyone she knew. She was absolutely devoted to the students, especially those who worked with her on Chesed projects. I called them the Benel kids. When I interviewed students as part of the college process and asked them about their activities, one of my standard questions was, are you a Benel kid? They would even come to her with their personal problems, confident that DeeDee would be discreet, honest, and warm, and would offer them motherly advice they could count on. That motherly advice extended to her peers as well. DeeDee had an almost magical way of turning up just when you needed help and stepping in to help in an unobtrusive way. I learned that most forcefully and gratefully when she turned up at Memorial Sloan Kettering, really exactly as my husband Solomon was dying, pretty much at the moment he died. She found me and my children in the waiting room on Erev Shavuot, holding each other and sobbing. All I really remember is DeeDee saying, I'll get the Hever Kadisha and I'll handle this, don't worry. And she did. Every time she saw me in the hall, she would ask how it was, not in the usual perfunctory way that most people do, but in an intense and confidential tone that told me she really cared and would offer help if help were needed. I'm quite sure she acted the same way with other colleagues too. DeeDee cared so much more than most people that we might imagine that caring was her only gift. Not so. She was tremendously talented. She produced countless programs for holidays and other special days, always seeking some new angle, some new way to reach the audience. She created award-winning films just for our school assemblies. She consistently sought out talent, fostered it, and worked it into her programs. So many students and adults gained skills and confidence because DeeDee singled them out and worked with them to hone their talents. And all was done with great modesty, downplaying her own role. Because she was such a perfectionist, she sometimes did not trust her own abilities. She was a beautiful writer who would ask me to copy edit her writing again and again. Who could possibly say no to DeeDee? Among countless other projects, DeeDee was a seminal figure in the planning of the book days we used to have, when the entire school would read the same book and partake in activities surrounding it for the day. DeeDee would not rest unless she could make those book days special. I remember her arranging a FaceTime visit with the boy who harnessed the wind from Malawi, projecting him onto a big screen in the auditorium. That day also included graceful African dancers and tempting African food, just amazing. DeeDee modeled for our students a love of Israel, but also a love of country and a caring for the world. If I wanted to render Tikkun Olam in marble, I would build a statue of DeeDee Benel. Ah, DeeDee, could death ever extinguish your flaming light?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabe Low, and I graduated from Ramaz in 2015. 2 years ago, I stood in the Ramaz Middle School auditorium addressing a crowd for Ramaz and KJ's annual Tekes Ma'avar, the ceremony between Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, organized by Ms. Benel. I opened my speech by telling the audience the following. Anyone who's in high school with me knows I'm a sucker for Ms. Benel's ceremonies. I don't think there was one ceremony of hers I didn't participate in during my time at Ramaz. So, when she asked me to speak tonight, it was a no-brainer. Tonight was a no-brainer too. It is an honor and a privilege to speak about Ms. Benel on the eve of her Shloshim. On the topic of public speaking, Ms. Benel quite literally taught me and countless other students how to speak publicly. I'll always remember how she meticulously edited my speeches before a given assembly, commenting not only on the content and the grammar, but also my delivery. I can still visualize those vertical lines Ms. Benel penciled into my speeches to indicate when to pause for dramatic effect, because for Ms. Benel, her student speeches were about the impact they can make on the audience. Before delivering this particular speech 2 years ago, I received the following text from Ms. Benel. Mailing you newest version, minor edits mainly in language, not ideas. I'm sure to send even another draft, smiley face emoji. Can you choose slides now? Nothing major will change. Thank you. It's incomprehensible how she not only had time to dissect my speech, but also had time to choose the pictures for the accompanying slideshow, when in reality she had a million other pressing things to do. I once asked her to send me information about an event, and in typical DeeDee fashion, without hesitation, always a little cryptic, but to the point and genuine, she replied, for sure, just in the throes of finishing never with other Chovot obligations. Thanks for all, DeeDee. Ms. Benel was synonymous with Chesed. She was the Chesed queen with an unofficial PhD in acts of kindness and a master's in selflessness. Ms. Benel spent every waking hour giving back to her family, friends, students, co-workers, Ramaz, KJ, New York City, the Jewish community, and the world at large. Chesed was Ms. Benel's calling, inspiring countless students and their families to take ownership of their obligations to the Jewish community and the world around them. She made everyone feel unique, important, and necessary. Her passion was contagious. Her intellect was motivating. Her integrity was unmatched, and her humility was inspiring. Ms. Benel was truly in a league of her own. The informal education and experiential learning that she imbued in me enhanced my formal education and my life, and is part of what made Ramaz so unique. It is amazing how one person can make such a profound impact on so many. Ms. Benel believed in me and all of her students, which in turn helped us believe in ourselves and stand up for what we believe in. Ms. Benel showed us that Chesed has to be lived, not just taught. She taught us to embody and love Chesed, not just do Chesed. We have to make Chesed a part of our lives, and it is integral to our existence as Jews and as people of the world. In order to accomplish this, Ms. Benel championed countless initiatives. When my older siblings were in high school, Ms. Benel encouraged them to join her at the weekly prayer vigil for Gilad Shalit across from the Iranian mission. They told me that if I wanted to succeed at Ramaz and in life, I needed to learn from Ms. Benel, as they had done through the prayer vigil, a Festa mission to Argentina, weekly sandwich packing, and much more. So that's exactly what I did. I had the privilege of joining Ms. Benel at the prayer vigil on a Habitat for Humanity trip in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, packing food for New York City's homeless every Wednesday and Thursday through Coalition for the Homeless and City Harvest, and participating in many of the assemblies she orchestrated. Ms. Benel took so much pride in her work, and it was an honor to be one small piece in her larger puzzle. This is just a small sampling of her 30-year tenure and immeasurable Chesed opportunities. Ms. Benel was also so proud of her Israeli soldiers. I'll always remember when she showed the entire upper school a video of two Ramaz alumni who had just finished training for the Golani Brigade. Ms. Benel organized a camera crew to meet them at the end of their final march during training. Ms. Benel made sure her soldiers in Israel never felt alone. When I saw this video, I immediately said to myself, I want to be like those soldiers, and ultimately enlisted 3 years later. But Ms. Benel's reach spread much farther than just Ramaz. When I was in the Golan Heights one day during the Army, I struck up a conversation with a local. When he found out I was from New York City and Ramaz, he immediately said, "Atomic here, DeeDee, do you know DeeDee?" And when a friend of mine from a different school needed Chesed hours, Ms. Benel immediately took it upon herself to organize a volunteer opportunity for my friend, and then write a letter of recommendation on his behalf. She texted me right after, quote, "Took care of your friend because of you. Maybe you shouldn't know I sent this to you. Just wanted you to know I am at your command." Ms. Benel made everyone feel as though she was at their command. Ms. Benel also had superpowers. One time, my sibling was on a Festa mission with Ms. Benel to Israel. On the way back to America, he couldn't find his passport. To make a long story short, Ms. Benel was able to get my brother out of Israel, arguably the country that cares about safety most, without a passport. Another time, a friend of mine and I were tasked with lighting the candles at a Yom HaZikaron assembly to commemorate the numerous wars that occurred in Israel over the years. In a dark, packed, and silent room, my friend and I pathetically struggled to light the candles for 5 minutes. In superwoman fashion, Ms. Benel rushed in and lit the candles effortlessly. I'm sorry my two youngest siblings and future generations of Ramaz students won't experience the DeeDee effect firsthand, but I am confident she will live on in our hearts and through our acts of kindness going forward. I ended my speech 2 years ago speaking about the importance of balance in Israel's unique culture. Tonight I end with the same message. The culture of Israel, I said, is unique because both the tragedies and joys are essential. Let us always balance our sadness and happiness, our tragedy and triumph. Let us continue to add meaning to our lives and continue to support and elevate Israel, the Jewish people, and humanity, just like Ms. Benel did every single second of her life. We will all miss you, Ms. Benel, but you will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Before we begin, I would like to thank Mr. Rochlin, Ms. Feldman, and everyone else involved in organizing and starting special events in memory of DeeDee Benel. My name is Avigail Dupont, and I graduated Ramaz this past June. When I look back at my high school years and reflect on the people who helped shape me into the person I am today, DeeDee Benel is the first person that comes to mind. I first met Ms. Benel in 9th grade when I started getting involved with the environmental club and other chesed initiatives. As a young freshman, there wasn't much I knew about high school, let alone how to run a club. But Ms. Benel quickly took me under her wing and guided me throughout the next 3 years. And little did I know the enormous impact she would have on my life at that time. Throughout the years, I had the privilege of working very closely with DeeDee on different projects and missions for the upper school. I had the privilege of witnessing her incredible drive, resilience, enthusiasm, and immense generosity. She brought passion and light into every project we worked on for the environmental club and so much more. Her kindness and positivity was contagious, and she impacted everybody she worked with. DeeDee taught me to never give up, no matter how many obstacles you encounter, and she forever instilled in me a love for chesed and helping those in need. She was an amazing mentor, teacher, friend, and whose memory and legacy will live on forever. Thank you.
I'm honored to participate this evening in the Shloshim in memory of DeeDee Benel. I can't remember the first time I met DeeDee, but I can remember virtually every conversation. She somehow reached out to me and we spoke each year before Yom HaShoah, each year before Kristallnacht, and whenever there was a crisis in Jewish life. She kept me close to Ramaz. I'm a graduate from 1963, which is now almost 50 years ago, and had a real sense of her profound love for the Jewish people, a profound identity with Jewish history, and more importantly, her profound commitment to Ramaz and to the students of Ramaz. And I kept thinking back time and again, if there was anyone in my high school experience who displayed the same passion, the same commitment, the same depth and determination, and the same creative vision to try to do something different and new, something that would reach the students, not only inform them intellectually, but move them emotionally and cause them to identify even more with Jewish history, with Jewish memory, and with the Jewish future. She was a treasure. She was a deep and profound friend. She was a woman who influenced me, and she was a woman whom I revered, respected, and enjoyed. I shall miss her greatly, and I think we're all diminished by her absence as we were blessed by her presence.
I'm Caroline Arfa Massel, Ramaz class of 1990. The Rav described the password of the Jew as chesed, kindness and compassion to his fellow Jews and his fellow man. With that password, chesed, DeeDee Benel unlocked for me and for generations of other students a deeper understanding of what it really means to be a Jew. I was blessed that DeeDee joined the Ramaz Upper School when I was a sophomore. Frankly, I can't remember Ramaz without DeeDee. DeeDee's creed was straightforward from the beginning. Always think of others and do good for them. Chesed that is good enough is never enough. And most important, if no one is doing the job, you must do it. DeeDee embodied the power of what one person could accomplish. As a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I began my relationship with DeeDee through my involvement in Yom HaShoah. Every program was heavily rehearsed. Every speech had to be written in advance, reviewed, edited, rewritten. DeeDee demanded clarity and excellence in every program because the topic and the audience deserved that respect. After graduating Ramaz during my first year at Barnard, I attended the Columbia Hillel Yom HaZikaron program. At the center of the presentation was a Ramaz classmate, a college freshman. It was a classmate who had not been very involved in student activities at Ramaz. I asked him, "How did you, a freshman, come to organize this program?" He explained, "I heard there was not an organized Yom HaZikaron program, so I thought, what would Mrs. Benel have done? And I did it." DeeDee's message had spread by osmosis. See the gap, do the job, and do it well. As a young Ramaz alumna, I came back to Ramaz once to speak about Holocaust remembrance. Prior to the event, DeeDee asked me to share my remarks with her. I was surprised. After all, I was a 22-year-old college graduate. But I reluctantly sent them in. She shredded my remarks and made me rewrite them. And of course, she was right. As I speak today, I know that my words would have benefited from DeeDee's careful editing. When my daughter Rebecca entered the Ramaz Upper School 4 years ago, I wondered if DeeDee would have the same impact as students as she had 30 years earlier. My chesed-driven daughter entered high school with strong ideas of what she wanted to do. Then she met the formidable Ms. Benel, who pushed Rebecca further than she could have ever imagined. Soup kitchens, midnight runs, clothing drives, masbia, challah bakes, trips to Puerto Rico and Moldova. The message was always the same. Each of us has so much to give. Find it. Do it. The world needs what you can offer. As a student, an alumna, a parent, and a friend, the world does not seem complete without DeeDee running somewhere in her sneakers, pushing each of us to do more. We are blessed to have had DeeDee in our lives. Her legacy lives on in her beautiful family and in the thousands of students she inspired.
The word chesed is almost too narrow. It's a much broader concept of being completely selfless in a time when everything is a me too and me generation and I chat and I say, here we are just givers in whatever way we can. And they're trying to put together a balanced meal. Each little container has its meat, has its starch, has its vegetable. But most importantly is to create a sense of camaraderie around the idea of giving. These kids haven't seen each other all summer. It's as if not a blink, not a moment went by. They're here because they want to be here. And that's what we hope every one of our kids somehow finds a way, his way, her way, of integrating this idea of giving time without it being labeled something, without getting any specific bonus. Just doing it because as long as we can, we will.
Volunteering with Miss Benel was one of the highlights of my high school experience. She inspired me, she guided me, and I feel so grateful to have had the privilege to learn from her. She was an energizer bunny, tirelessly working to share with others, and she did everything with care and love and a smile on her face. You know, I can picture her zooming around the school, recruiting volunteers for her next mission. I was fortunate to start to volunteer with her in 9th grade, through Bikur Cholim. But then one of my most memorable experiences with Miss Benel was when she took a group of us to visit Whitwell. Whitwell is a small town in Tennessee, predominantly white. And years ago in the middle school, they had started studying the Holocaust. And none of the students had ever met a Jew before. And they also couldn't fathom this idea of 6 million people perishing in the Holocaust. And so what they did was they started to collect paper clips, one paper clip to represent each Jew who was killed, and they collected 6 million paper clips, and then they went on to collect 11 million paper clips to represent the 11 million people who were killed. And they created like this small museum in the backyard of their school where they actually bought an original cattle car from the Holocaust, and they filled it with all of the paper clips and letters from survivors of the Holocaust. And the project became about tolerance, tolerance from all sorts of people. And so Miss Benel took us to visit this space that they created in the backyard of their middle school, and we ended up meeting the students who originally participated in the project. They had never met a Jew before, and I think many of us had never been to, a town like Whitwell, Tennessee before too. So it was really beautiful to meet, people who were different than us, who grew up differently with different backgrounds, and foster and cultivate this tolerance and understanding between us. It was really, really beautiful. And I remember the students ended up coming to visit New York, and we met up with them in New York as well. And then there was a documentary that was created around the Paper Clips project. And there is a part that was added to it with Ramaz students speak. And so some of us are interviewed as part of that documentary, and our experience with going to that town and meeting those students and seeing that project coming to life there. It was a very, very special experience, and one that has definitely imprinted and marked me for my life. Then Miss Benel took some of us to Utah to speak at a conference about our experience, which was really cool. And when I think of Miss Benel and I think about, how many students she touched at Ramaz, if she touched me so profoundly, how many more there are of us out there. But then, she also took us to all these different places around the world. And so how many people she was able to touch through taking us to those places too. And the impact that she left is just kind of mind-blowing. I learned from Miss Benel persistence to never accept the word no, and to always be looking for someone to help. Nothing is ever impossible. May Miss Benel's memory forever be a blessing.
Hello everyone, I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts about our wonderful friend DeeDee Benel. I had the privilege of working with DeeDee for 30-something years. My office was next to hers for most of those years, and I was able to observe the way she worked, her dedication, her energy. To say DeeDee went at 80,000 RPMs is not really defining who she was. She was driven by her passion for the Jewish people, for Eretz Yisrael, for Jewish history, and the need that our children should know who we are and what the Jewish experience has been and grow thereby. And so her love for Israel came out in so many ways. Besides the Yoms, any opportunity to bring in someone, the head of the Tzamchanim, the paratroopers, a Yad Hashem personality, a person from this kibbutz who represents something, a program for disabled in Israel. She found these people, she cajoled them into coming, and she helped make their presentation relevant to us, and we grew thereby. DeeDee was passionate about the Holocaust. Her parents weren't survivors, but like so many of us who lived, born shortly after that period, were overwhelmed by what the Jewish people went through. And DeeDee wanted us to understand that knowing it will change our lives. And so she found the most amazing people, from rescuers, Polish and French rescuers, to people who had been little children on Kristallnacht and pleaded with the Gestapo to free their parents, to the daughter of the head of education in the Third Reich. The woman said, I don't want to be here, but DeeDee insisted I come for the sake of the children. They have to know. This woman, by the way, converted to Judaism. The war itself, an American, DeeDee believed in Memorial Day and Veterans Day. One year, we brought in the Tuskegee Airmen, and DeeDee asked me to please mind them for an hour or so. Wonderful experience. And by the way, that's so much of who she was. When you were involved in her programming, you grew from that experience as well. All the Shabbatons, dozens of Shabbatons. DeeDee had them planned with a theme, because there's a lesson we want to convey to the children. And even if you didn't buy into it at first, when you saw her dedication, you thought about yours, hey, this is a good point. And you grew thereby as well. We went to the Soviet Union, and then we went a few years later to Minsk and Pinsk, and the encounters with people, the obligation to help our brothers and sisters. It wasn't a show, it wasn't a job. This is what DeeDee was. This is what the children saw as well, and this would impress them, and this would impress me. You couldn't say no to DeeDee because you know that she believes in what she's doing, and she was usually 99.9% of the time she was right. Having known her changed my life and the life of my children and the people in my community, because I've shared so many of the stories that I have to her. She'll be terribly missed. She is irreplaceable. Bezrat Hashem with Biat Mashiach, and I can't imagine the programming she'll do then. Thank you for your time.
תיאטרון הבובות.
The Puppeteer.
מה עשית ומה דאגת? מה יפית ומה נעמת?
What have you accomplished and how deeply you cared? Your inner radiance bestows kindness.
בחזקת מטלה, בכנות מזהירה.
Encapsulated in action with truth and integrity.
מה ראית ומה דאבת? מה קנית ומה מסרת?
What has met your eyes and moved your aching heart? What have you deemed worthy and what have you skipped?
בהגיון שאלה, בחמלת תשורה.
Careful reasoning filled your quests, compassion gifting your pride.
טעם ריח אבן בוחן, מסורת תנא כלי אציל, שחר ליל יום משקיף, משימות לאלה להבדיל.
Tastefully evaluating every scent, impregnated tradition as a lofty tool. As dawn rises, onlooking back and forth, shuffling targets upwards and onwards.
מה כיסית ומה גילית? מה השלמת ומה החסרת?
What have you uncovered and what was left unseen? What have you fulfilled and what has been contained?
בגאון עשייה, במעיין נביאה.
Purposefulness in the rising tide, drinking the ever-flowing well.
מה ספגת ומה דחית? מה זרעת ומה קצרת?
What have you absorbed and what has been delayed? What have you sown and what has been obtained?
בתיאום ענווה, באלפי חזרה.
In harmonious, humble stride, commencing 1,000 possibilities.
לחש סבר מי בצורת, הבל כסות חדות מעט. בוקר ערב צהריים, כיסופים לחוד חנית.
A whispering expression curing the drought, mundanely unearthed, minimal sharpness. Day in, day out, turning spears to silver linings.
מה חווית ומה שתקת? מה חזית ומה ערפת?
What have you experienced and what have you not shared? What have you witnessed and what a hidden evidence?
בסינון מדוחה, בגישור תעלה.
Brick and mortar at your sifting, manifesting both the tunnel and the bridge.
מה שרית ומה שררת? מה שווית ומה שבתת?
How have you governed and how have you bestowed authenticity? What have you equated and what has ceased and gone?
בטיהור מי תפלה, בחיבור דמי עמלה.
Purifying insipid waters, a commissioned bloody essay.
הרף שפע כל מחלוקת, רשף סבר דרך ארץ, צל אישון עוד יומה, כל עניין ועניינו.
Constant abundance to every division, courteous sparkling explanation. Shadowed pupil filled her day, all interests subjected in turn.
מה ציפית ומה קיבלת? מה הצית ומה הוצת?
What have you expected and what have you received? What kindled your mind and what have you set aflame?
בקניין מור שיבה, בכיליון ראש תשומה.
A returned fragrant investment heading to annihilated attention.
מה שתלת ומה יגעת? מה הביט ומה נבט?
How have you tended your garden and how lovingly have you labored? What has been onlooking and what has sprouted again?
בשיחון אל בינה, בחלוק רש דמעה.
A phrase book intelligence, clothed in a robe of tears.
שחק גופר בת תיבה, סוף קדים נאספה, בבואתה חצר מלכות, לחום פניה נלקחה.
Cemented skyscraper box, collected the ending bow, her silhouette in the queen's court, sealed with her emphatic glow.
מה סיווגת ומה מיינת? מה איתרת ומה הלבשת?
What have you classified and what have you sorted through? What have you decorated and what simply dressed up?
בקישון מקשתה, בענפי טיפוחה.
Her hardened lot upon high rivers, her branches cultivated with song.
מה תמצתת ומה הרחבת? מה קישת ומה הצנעת?
What have you summarized and what have you expanded upon? What have you adorned and what has been obscured?
בתיכון כליל ידה, בים סוף קריאתה.
The Mediterranean shores your safety. The Red Sea parts hands in farewell.
גדר תמונה כחץ וקשת, שובל סופה כמי נהר, כטל משנת 40, על חלוקי נחל, גבורתה.
A fenced image of arrow to bow, a trailed storm on tranquil river, like the tail of evening dew on mighty rocks turning away. Dedicated to the journey of DeeDee Benel, God's daughter, a teacher, mentor, friend, accomplished scholar, iron maiden, exemplary human, the crown of her family. Written by Rami Yadid.
Shalom, DeeDee.
Thank you for being my inspiration. Because you see, you would just come up to me and you would say, you know what we have to do? And we would do it. I remember traveling to Whitwell, Tennessee with you, the former Soviet Union, Minsk and Pinsk, Buenos Aires. No one's really going to believe this, but you were the ones who would come and say, this is what we must do. Thank you for showing me the way, for leading me, for allowing me to be a part of your lives in ways that impacted all of us, and I think perhaps me the most from you. Thank you. B'hatzlacha.
יום מאחד אחיך ואחד שעריך. לא תאמץ את לבבך. When there will be a person in need among your brothers in your place, do not harden your heart, says the Torah in Parshat Re'eh. Rashi comments, what does it mean to harden the heart? Yesh lacha adam shenitzta'er. There are some people who are warriors. Im yitain, im lo yitain. Should I or shouldn't I? They are called shouldniks. Patoach tiftach et yadcha. Stop worrying already and just open up your hands. Afilu kama pa'amim, says Rashi, patoach tiftach, the stress, even again and again and again. This is a project lesson on how to think about chesed opportunities. It is a lesson which DeeDee taught verbally and orally, but most of all, through modeling. She taught and lived this lesson. When you see a need, don't overthink. Go for it. Plan carefully and do whatever is necessary. As the Nike ad famously puts it, just do it. I can hear her say those words. Just do it. Moreover, she didn't wait for needs to come to her. She was, like Abraham Avinu, a Yoshev Petach HaOhel Kachom Hayom. She was sitting on the threshold of her tent, like Abraham, looking out for needs to be met. Vayar v'hinei shlosha anashim, and she would see those needs. Vayar vayarotz likratam mipetach ha'ohel. As was stated so many times tonight, she saw and she ran. She ran like nobody else ran. Remember, in that scene dealing with Avraham Avinu, he was recovering from Brit Milah, circumcision at the age of 99. It was the third day, say our sages, after the circumcision, the day on which the pain is greatest. And there he was, Petach HaOhel, on the threshold of his tent, looking for needs. My picture is DeeDee Benel, suffering from cancer, receiving chemotherapy, and at the same time, when nobody knew what was going on, looking for needs and meeting them. To do good, to teach New York kids to do good, because it will have an effect and an impact on their lives in addition to the lives which are being served. She was always looking for causes and projects. Yoshevet Petach HaOhel, hurricanes, paper clips, 9/11 lunches for first responders, Israeli soldiers at the front, Habitat for Humanity, Lo ta'ametz et levavecha. She never hesitated. Boom, let's go. And off she went with her crew. A ready, open hand to do good and to get kids to do good. And what an impact she had. You've heard a lot of it today. But you can't possibly imagine how Ramaz was flooded with emails after her passing. I've never seen anything like it. So many testimonials to the effect on their lives. The Shiva house was filled with stories about how DeeDee influenced students and impacted their lives. Just yesterday, I met an alumnus, Ariel Fisher, who came to the Ramaz Upper School from Heschel Elementary School and ended up as a rabbi. He and his wife spending 4 years as the JLIC rabbinic couple at Princeton. And now they are living in Israel. I asked him, it was at a wedding of a Ramaz alumna, Gabe Low, who at Ramaz helped to shape who he had become. He thought and mentioned a couple of great Judaic studies teachers, one of whom is here and spoke. And I asked, what about DeeDee Benel? And his eyes lit up. And he said, Miss Benel, she was a powerful influence on my life choices and who I am now and what I am doing. Minutes before I came here to this Shloshim memorial, I had a premarital conference with a young couple, one of whom, Jake Wilmer, is of course a cherished alumnus of Ramaz. He and his fiancée, Lisa Hurt, met during COVID and had to date and court each other in COVID. And Lisa, describing, laughed about how their dates were organized, where you could go in COVID. You know where they went? Many dates consisted of packing food for Met Council. They did it together dating and courting each other, preparing for their wedding later this month. So I asked Jake, I bet you got those ideas from DeeDee Benel. He said, absolutely. I learned this kind of thing at Ramaz from DeeDee. DeeDee taught 2 generations of Ramaz students how to give, how to be potchim et yedehem, but most of all, to give of themselves to those in need, to the communities in which they live, and to the society of which we are all a part. Ein osin nefashot l'chachamim, say our sages. We don't build monuments to the wise. Shema'aseihem hein hein zichrona. Their deeds, pun intended, deeds, and their influences on people render them immortal. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Mamaronim Hamsei Menucha Nechonaho Al Kanfei HaShekhinah V'malos Kedoshim U'Tahorim Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim L'nishmas Ha'eshes Hayel Haya Rivka Bat Yosef Halevi Umalka Shehalachare Ulamah Ba'or Sha'anachu Mispalalim Le'ilui Nishmasa Began Eden Tehei Menuchasa Lachei Ba'orachamim Yasti Roch B'Seser Kanapabli Olamim V'yitzror achayim es nishmasa Adonai hu nachalasa Yisanuach Yishalom al nishkavach V'nomach